Deputy Speaker, I think there probably is something seriously wrong with the member for Goldstein's, with the heart of the member for Goldstein's liberal philosophy, and I'm certainly not speaking in this debate today because I want to grandstand or because I'm out of touch with my electorate. I'm making a contribution here in support of the Fair Work Amendment protecting take-home pay bill, like many of my other Labor colleagues, because I represent an electorate in which large numbers of people, even if they are fortunate to have jobs, are really struggling to make ends meet, Deputy Speaker. They struggle to find as much work as they need to sustain their families. They struggle to meet the ever-increasing costs of living on wages that remain stagnant and are currently at record low rates relative to the cost of living. The reality for so many of these hard-working people, Deputy Speaker, is that penalty rates have become an essential component of their pay. It's the difference between just managing and not really managing at all. Cuts to penalty rates in the retail and hospitality sector, of which many of my constituents are employed in, evenly only partial cuts would have the effect of a cut of up to 10% of these workers' wages, and that is just not possible. That 10% cut, my constituents cannot take that hit. So when you're talking about modest pay packets to begin with, this is, as I've said, a devastating cut. Now, we know that those who would be most affected, Deputy Speaker, will be the young people. They'll be women and they'll be the migrant workers. Young people in particular who juggle work and study and who we all know, are already at risk of being exploited, underpaid and treated as expendable by many employers. The evidence is in relation to the exploitation of young people. Women, Deputy Speaker, who are often the sole supporters of their families and who juggle numerous paid and unpaid jobs at the same time, they too stand to be affected. And migrant workers who have limited working choices because of language barriers, because they lack the networks, and who may be highly qualified, as many of my constituents are, but do not have those qualifications or experience recognised in the local employment market. But of course, Deputy Speaker, there will be many working men equally affected as women will be to penalty rate cuts and to take-home pay, particularly those in my electorate who, after years of dedicated service, have found themselves the victims of a declining manufacturing sector and forced to make do with irregular, casual and part-time work. Deputy Speaker, the loss of the local car industry due to the neglect and outright hostility of this government has forced so many local women and in particular men in my electorate into insecure and often poorly paid work. Now, this unemployment and insecurity in men in particular is further compounded by the devastating impact it creates on their sense of identity as providers for their families. It's a devastating hit at a very personal level, affecting their sense of purpose and their contribution to the broader community and to their families. Deputy Speaker, coherent industry policy and fair wages policy is vital, and because it has a real impact on real lives and communities such as those that I represent. It impacts upon the ability of working people to feed their kids, to pay rent and enjoy, however modestly, their lives. Now, so the ability to enjoy life, Deputy Speaker, is not some indulgence that should be reserved for highly paid white-collar workers, as some of the other side here seem to believe. If we're serious about economic stimulus and growth, we need a society where people can afford to participate. It does take a community of properly paid people to ensure that more people like them can actually get jobs. And just last week, I was speaking to one of the last industries that still exists in my electorate, Deputy Speaker, and that is the caravan manufacturing industry. And this is a very important local industry that employs local people. But their view is that if people can't afford to buy caravans because they can barely afford to pay the rent, what will happen to those jobs? And that's a real issue for us in the federal seat of Calwell. The protection of home pay is not only vital for fairness, for justice, but equally it is important for the health of our economy. And I strongly reject the argument that cutting wages at this time of historically low wages already, that somehow this will lead to employment growth. It won't. It does not, it has not, and it never will. And anyone that propagates that is propagating a myth. So, Deputy Speaker, I support this bill, not just because because it does protect the home pay, the take-home pay of some 700,000 low-paid workers that is in our national interests. I support this bill because it is in our national interest to do so.
I thank